So the other day I was thinking about a conversation that I was having with a buddy of mine a couple years back, and he was asking me, he was saying, "Hey man, if God exists, why does bad things happen to good people? Why does good things happen to bad people? Why is there evil in the world?" And at the time I had an answer for him, and it was probably pretty good, but obviously over the years I've had a lot more time to think about it. And I can't really say why these things happen because I don't really know the will of God, but I can say that they do happen, and I think that's definitely a biblical concept. I think the idea that if God exists, then bad things would not happen. That's not scriptural. Like that might be how people feel, but when you read the Bible, you don't see that. And there are several examples. The first being Pharaoh. Pharaoh was raised up by God for a specific purpose, and God said, "I raised him up to make my name known throughout the world." At the time, the Israelites didn't think Pharaoh was good. He was an evil ruler, and they were in slavery. But by following God's will and Pharaoh being who he was, God's name was made known throughout the entire world, and the Israelites were made free. The second example is Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar took Judah into captivity and made all of the Israelites worship him. On the face of it, that's a really bad thing. However, God said, "Nebuchadnezzar is my servant," and he is serving a purpose. And the purpose was to, when they sacked Judah, they kept all of the vessels from the temple. Now, ultimately, King Nebuchadnezzar ended up making Daniel a leader in Israel and ended up bowing down and saying, "Daniel, your God is the most high God over all other gods," which is cool. But when he was enslaving the Israelites, they didn't see that as a good thing. Now, keep in mind, the vessels that God wanted him to preserve were the vessels that were ended up being used when they rebuilt the temple around the time of Ezra, and that ultimately Christ ended up being in the time of the New Testament. Um, the next obvious example, Judas Iscariot. Christ said, "I have selected 12 of you. I have chosen 12 of you, and one of you is a devil." He was chosen for a specific purpose. At the time, nobody who saw these things happen thought that Judas Iscariot was good or what happened was good, but God chose him, and it was for the prophecies to be fulfilled. And last is Paul. Paul was there when Stephen was killed, and he condoned it. He hunted Christians, but ultimately he had his experience on the road to Damascus. And when he went to Ananias, God told Ananias, "Go ahead and heal him. He is a chosen vessel of mine, and he will preach the word to the Gentiles and to the Israelites." And when Paul was persecuting Christians, nobody thought it was a good thing. But ultimately, he ended up writing a good portion of the New Testament and being one of the biggest proponents for Christ. So all of these people that were perceived to be bad, Pharaoh was bad, God's will was done, and he was still bad and ended up dying. Nebuchadnezzar was bad, God's will was done, and he ended up, I guess, turning face, but he was still, enslaving the Israelites. Judas Iscariot was good in the beginning and then turned bad, and Paul was bad and turned good. So there are all these unpredictable things, horrible things happening in the process, and the whole time God's will is being done. He stated that I have chosen these people. So when you look around and you see things happening with politics and wars happening and arguments amongst people and saying, "Hey, if God exists, where's the peace?" Just know that that is not a biblical concept. What we see in the world happening is more of a biblical concept based on what we read in Scripture. It's chaos. It's God's people being persecuted. But just know He has a plan. And I don't profess to know His will. I don't think anybody can really know His will, but you can see it all playing out over time. And sometimes it takes the 40 years that the Israelites spent in the desert, or however many years these things take to play out with King Nebuchadnezzar or any of these other examples. But ultimately, just know that not seeing peace doesn't mean that God's will is not being done. That's all I got today. Thank you guys. And if you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. Thank you.